While it may be cold outside, things are getting toasty warm at Global Voice Broadcasting. Heat up your winter nights with the hottest topics, the hottest celebrities, and today's best music. It's why Global Voice Broadcasting is becoming your 24/7 home for the music and talk you want right now. Discover your favorite shows and music anytime at globalvoicebroadcasting.com.
I highly recommend Ms. Hicks. Her books, her CDs are encouraging.
I bought her book, A Hill to Climb. She's a very inspirational speaker.
And I look forward to one day being able to work with her.
Your power lies within you. Let it loose.
Aspiration, inspiration, motivation, edification, determination. These are the keys of life success, brought to you by none other than award-winning author, motivational lecturer, business consultant, and much more as she gets you aimed to your purpose. And now, ladies and gentlemen, young and elder, from Hollywood to the entire world, here is your host of Aim to Purpose, the radio show, Louise Hicks, along with her co-host, yours truly, Kenan Wesley Mason.
Although it is debated, the First African Baptist Church of Savannah, Georgia is thought to be the very first Black Baptist church established in America. This church owed its formation to the work of three men, David George, George Leal, and Andrew Bryan, who were brought together by the American Revolution. Andrew Bryan, the founder of the First African Baptist Church, was born enslaved in 1737 on a plantation outside of Charleston, South Carolina. In 1788, Bryan was ordained, and his church was certified, predating the establishment of a white Baptist church in Savannah, Georgia by 5 years. Andrew Bryan served as coachman and body servant to his slave owner, Jonathan Bryan, who, along with his brother Hugh Bryan, both of whom were Southern whites and more importantly Christians, and several other Southern Christian white planters in the area, was arrested by the local officials for preaching to the slaves. Jonathan Bryan's plantation became the center of efforts by a dissenting group of planters to evangelize their slaves. The First African Baptist Church also served as a stop on the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, the church housed runaway slaves in a 4-foot space beneath the sanctuary floorboards. The current sanctuary facility is located in Savannah, Georgia, in the National Historic District on Franklin Square, and was built in the 1850s, completed in 1859, by both free African Americans and slaves. The church museum contains archives and memorabilia that date back to the 18th century. The museum is open to visitors daily during normal hours of operation, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. In God We Trust is the official national motto of the United States. Clearly, African Americans witnessed a different experience from their early Christian brothers in America. The Bible teaches in Luke 6:43-45 to judge a tree by the fruit it bears. Once African Americans learned to read and interpret the Bible for themselves, they saw the fallacies in the Christian clergy and the U.S. government's argument that all men are created free. One of the great challenges with faith among African Americans is the view, by some as it still exists today, that Christianity is the white man's religion. Some believe that Christianity was and is the religion of the oppressors, the religion of those who sit in the Hippocratic seat of power, in the American church, and in the government of the United States. God continues to claim victory over this misguided belief. Every day we are shown evidence that we are all one in Christ Jesus. Throughout its inception during the time of the Roman Empire, Christian evangelicals have seen their primary tasks as spreading the gospel and making disciples. Their practice was to avoid any issues that might interfere with what they believed was this single mission of the church. They called for changes in the hearts of people, rather than changes in the institution of government. They believed that whatever was wrong in society would be corrected when more men and women were converted to Christianity.
Hello, world. How is everybody today? Again, welcome to Aim to Purpose, the radio show, and I am your host, Louise Hicks.
And I am your co-host, Kenan Wesley Mason, and I want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone listening and watching Aim to Purpose, the radio show. We want to welcome everyone from around the world and welcome all new listeners, as always. And if you want to chime in to this special broadcast here, as always, from around the world, 1-323-522-5482 from anywhere around the world, 1-323-522-5482, as we acknowledge the very first day of Black History Month. We have a very special guest on Aim to Purpose, the radio show, as we call this edition Holy Lockdown, Religion and Black Culture in America, with our special guest, Jeremiah Camara.
And we are so happy to have Jeremiah join us today on the show as we kick this month off, because we're going to talk about that too a little bit. Some people feel we shouldn't even have a Black History Month, and why were we chosen to have the shortest month of the year for Black history, and shouldn't we celebrate it every day?
Right.
So it's a lot of controversy surrounding Black History Month, but at any rate, we will explore some of that along with Jeremiah Camara's book, Holy Lockdown, Does the Church Limit Black Progress? And I'll hold this book up here so you can see it. I read the book, and I tell you, it's amazing, well written, very valid, has a lot of valid points in the book. And I hope everyone goes out and get this book, because it will really give you some very empowering and enlightening information as to our Black culture. And that's what we'll be talking about this month as we progress into it. We will have we're going to dedicate the entire month to the Black history and the Black issues, the Black culture, and religion and things that are happening around the country, particularly here in America, in our relationship to Black Americans here. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, we'd like to share a little bit about our weekend and what we did. I wanted to share with you that I went to a very awesome event yesterday quickly, and it was a book signing for none other than Alonzo Williams, who was depicted in the blockbuster summer movie Straight Outta Compton. And I haven't read it. I just picked it up yesterday. It was featured with X-Clan. Professor Ken knows the name of everybody, so I'll let him say the names.
Yeah, well, Brother Jay from X-Clan. And this is from my era of hip-hop, from the late 80s and on through the 90s and early 2000s. Brother Jay from X-Clan, Professor Griff, and Siddiqui Bakari.
Yes, so it was a great event. And Alonzo's book, again, Not Without Alonzo, NWA. Not Without Alonzo. And I look forward to reading the book. And Alonzo has been a guest on our show a couple of times, and I look forward to having him back after I read the book. But
I like having Alonzo on the show.
Oh yeah, he's a great guest, and we've had him on here a couple of times. So with that being said,
and also the CCHR event that we
that's
went
right.
to.
We went to the CCHR event. See, I forget some of these things. That was just a junior moment. I'll be 65, in another month. So sometimes I have little junior moments, not senior moments, but junior moments. But anyhow, we went to the CCHR event this week also, and that's for the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. And that was a very powerful event as well, because we talked about the mental health system. And as you all know that have been listening to our show, I am an advocate as well as an activist in the mental health care system, because I have a son that is mentally challenged, who inspired my award-winning book, A Hill to Climb, A Teenager's Battle with Cancer, Depression, and Drug Addiction. And that event was about us starting a movement, a grassroots movement, to insist that something is done about the mental health system here in America, because it is critically and severely broken. And guess who it impacts the most? Black people. In Los Angeles County alone, over 50% of the homeless people are black. The unemployment rate, according to statistics, is about 5% across the nation. However, with blacks, it's an average of 10%, and in some localities, it's as high as 50%. So that says a lot. The homeless, we are concerned about the elderly, how they are being treated. The foster care system, it's overwhelmingly black. So we have a lot of work to be done, and we're asking all ethnicities to join in and come out and support this mental health grassroots initiative. And we had some powerful guests on the show. Not on the show. We had some powerful guests. We have had powerful guests on the show, but we had Attorney Gary Brown, who has been in this practicing law for over 35 years in this mental health care system. He's coming out, and we'll have another meeting this Tuesday. So anybody that lives in the Los Angeles area, please come out tomorrow and support us. It will be at 8039, if I'm not mistaken. The address is 8039 Vermont Avenue, and that's in Los Angeles at the Church of Scientology Community Center. So if you could come out at 6:00 p.m. and join us, because we will be discussing it further.
And the CCHR is a global organization, and since Aim to Purpose, the radio show, is a global broadcast, many people around the world that may be listening or tuning in may know of the CCHR, and because this is not just an American epidemic, obviously, it's something that has spread globally, where the mentally challenged or people that have been diagnosed with mental illness, they do need the help because they have no one to support them other than people like my mom with my brother and the CCHR as an organization, so they can get the help. Los Angeles has been known as, or is known right now as, the largest homeless capital for veterans.
Yes.
For veterans. These are people that are coming back here to America from fighting all of these wars that have been going on for decades and decades and decades. And they get absolutely no support when they come home and have to function back into society and try to give themselves a sense of normalcy. So the CCHR is a great organization. I do support them, and you can also support them as well.
And also for any of our episodes that we've done about the veteran situation, because we have done it, go to our YouTube channel, AIMED, AIMED, the number 2, Purpose Radio. And you can see all the episodes. They are all archived there. And we have some great shows we've done about the veterans situation with them being drugged, because we know that the medical healthcare system is a business now that's driven by profit, not by the health care of the patients that really need it, particularly, as I said, the elderly, the foster care children, and the disabled, which includes many veterans. So with that being said, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk to our special guest today, Jeremiah Camara, and we will be talking about Holy Lockdown, religion, and black culture in America.
Yep, it's Aim to Purpose. We will be right back. Don't you go nowhere. Hello, world! It's a new year, which means new and live editions of Aim to Purpose, the radio show. We'll be sharing new ideas with new guests from around the world, revealing new truths with every new topic presented to you, the A2P universe. So tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right here at Global Voice Broadcasting at gvbstudios.com/show/A2P. You can also check out all of our archive shows on YouTube by typing in Aim to Purpose Radio. A special thank you to all the loyal viewers that have been with us from the beginning, and a big welcome and thank you to all the new viewers plugging into the A2P universe. Your power lies within you, so let it loose. Once again, this is Ken and Wesley Mason, co-hosts of Aim to Purpose, the radio show.
Hello, world, again. I am Louise Hicks of Aim to Purpose, the radio show, and thank you all for tuning in, along with my son and co-host, Ken and Wesley Mason. And we're going to go ahead now and introduce you to our very special guest as we start and kick off the month of Black History Celebration here in America.
Baptized at an early age, Jeremiah Camara moved to Cleveland, Ohio shortly after high school, where he began his quest toward a deeper understanding of spirituality. While in Cleveland, he began to diligently study the Bible and gave serious thought to becoming a minister, or at least living an active life in the church. Like many, he felt the church could provide him with the substance he was missing in the way of answers, meaning, and purpose in his life. He's quoted as saying, quote, "I began to see the church as one source of guidance and inspiration. The diversity of the world and its kaleidoscopic array of infinite ideas and wisdom would not permit my spirit to be confined only to the teachings of the church. It also disturbed me deeply to witness blacks praising so much but producing so little," end quote. As a former owner of Word Up Bookstore, Kamara created a video cassette documentary in 1989, Psychological Wars, which examines subliminal messages in sitcoms, cartoons, and commercials that negatively impacted the psyche of African Americans. The documentary received international attention and endorsements by noted black educators Naim Akbar and Juwanza Kunjufu. Following a long investigative hiatus, he rediscovered this same theological impotence when he moved to the Atlanta metro area, where he quickly discovered that church was big business. He knew then the time had come for him to write a book shedding light on the many psychologically crippling aspects within the church that keep blacks in the state of holy lockdown. Jeremiah Camara is the author of the books Holy Lockdown and The New Doubting Thomas. Kamara is also a poet and has also won several poetry awards, the most notable at the National Black Theater in Harlem, New York. He has performed poetry at the prestigious Apollo Theater, and is also the author of Smoke and Haze, a timeless collection of poetry which reflects his vivid imagination along with his prolific and sometimes humorous outlook concerning social injustice. So let's give a warm, special Aim to Purpose welcome to Jeremiah Camara.
Hello, Jeremiah. How are you?
How are you? Hey, Kenneth, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on, because this book you've written is awesome. I just have to say you have really come up with some very, I think people should really think about some things when it comes to religion, and they should go out and read your book, and I hope that everybody does. It shouldn't just be black people reading this book. I would suggest everybody, because that's what this show is all about, bridging the cultural gap and bringing us together as human beings as well. And this month we're going to devote the show to talking about a lot of the issues with black people. And I want to talk a little bit about, we showed a little bit up front about the first founding of the church and so forth within the black community back in the day, and that was an interesting clip. And if I may, Jeremiah, I'd like to read a quote that you said, I think in another interview, because I think it was so profound what you said here. And it says, your main point is, it seems to me, is that this theology of giving away your power adds to rather than helps to solve the problem of poverty in black communities. And I suspect in other poor communities, the situation is actually much worse than that. Prosperity gospel preachers are being massively enriched by this teaching. These pastors live lavish lives while their members struggle just to survive. That's powerful. And with that said, since we're going to talk about the culture in Black America, what is that culture, and what kind of triggered you to write this statement? Because it's a powerful statement. I mean, to speak this statement, I should say, in an interview, it is a powerful statement.
Well, I think culture in the context of the Black church, that is our culture. We've been conditioned to think that the way that we solve problems mainly happens through the church. The civil rights movement has been the leading example, and we feel as though that every strategy that we implement, every step that we take toward advancing ourselves and whatever that may be, must come through marching. It must come through singing "We Shall Overcome." It must come through mimicking the civil rights movement. There's a part in John, chapter 1, verse 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, et cetera, et cetera. In the beginning of this country was, as far as African Americans, after and even during the enslavement, the only thing you could partake in was religion.
Right.
It was the church. Religion, and without the church, Black people had little. The church was really the only organization that we had a sense of control over after, I would say, the 1700s, because the first churches on the plantations, where you had the little, church houses and the little meetings outside and the little cabins and stuff, they had to be under white supervision.
They sure did.
And whites had to make certain that we preached a certain doctrine. And so you just have this long history. And so when I wrote the book Holy Lockdown, I looked for references. I looked for a bibliography and a precedence that was set that I could pull from. There were none. Holy Lockdown was actually one of, if not the first book to criticize the institution of the Black church. We have grown to believe that, or have been conditioned to believe that, you don't question the church. This is just what you do. You go to church on Sunday, you tithe, you give your offerings, you give your tithing, and you keep your mouth shut, and you just do fall in line. Well, this hasn't worked for Black people. We're on the bottom of every category that you can name.
Yes, we are.
Economically, educationally, and health-wise.
Yes.
But yet we are the most prayerful people, on this planet. So then if the church is so instrumental, then why are the surrounding areas laden with so many problems? And there are 85,000 predominantly Black churches in this country, which means you can have 1,700 churches in every state.
Wow.
Even states where there is not Black people. I mean, just when I was in Los Angeles, I can't remember the street that I was on. I think it was,
That's okay. It's many on every
and they were
community.
just saturated.
It is.
And that's everywhere you go. In
Everywhere.
Chicago, I've been all over this country. Chicago was the worst that I've seen. The west side of Chicago, there is no place like that. There are churches next door, across the street, adjacent, behind one another. And for what? What is it doing? And so at some point in time, Lois and Kenneth, we need to ask this question, and don't tell me that my faith is not strong enough and I'm not tithing enough, as Creflo Dollar says, our covenant connector. Tithing is our covenant connector. And these preachers of LA, what they're saying, you just need to have, no. You're rich because we're giving you
That's it.
money.
but what are we getting back in return on our investment? And I'm with you on that, because I know in Texas you have the same problem. Within a 2 mile radius, there are probably 10 to 15 churches in the black community, and it's sad, because when you look around in the community, when you drive from one end of the city to another one, you can tell when you get into the black communities, and you can see all these churches, and you see a lot of liquor stores too, and it makes you wonder why can't we ask a question? I even had a person to tell me, a friend of mine, she asked her minister a question about the money, and he told her, you don't need to be concerned about that, but it's okay for them to ask you for your money.
Right. But isn't that something? That's the same thing a slave owner would say.
Right.
Don't question, what we do. You just pick that cotton. You know what I'm saying? If you were to invest in T. Rowe Price, Edward Jones, Mutual of Omaha, MetLife, you would want to know where your return of investment, what it was, your rate of return, your return of investment, your return on investment. You would ask this broker questions.
That's right.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to the church, you don't ask about this investment. And I tell you what they're giving you for your investment. They're giving you the same thing that they've been giving you since you were 5 years old.
Absolutely.
So if you go to church and you tell me or anyone else that you're learning something new every time, I won't call you a liar. I'll just say you're being disingenuous. Let's just say that. Because you know as well as I do that you hear the same thing over and over and over. I just listened to 30 minutes of TD Jakes, one of his latest, in late 2015 online. And he's telling you it doesn't matter what the IRS is going to do to you. It doesn't matter what the doctor says. It doesn't matter what the lawyer said. I mean, this is so silly, because it does matter what all these people say.
Yes, it does.
I just got a letter. This is ironic, Irene and Kenneth. I just got a letter today. My wife is a tax agent. She's a enrolled agent for the IRS. Okay, and I got a letter which I think is wrong, but anyway, I won't go into detail about the letter. It just happened today. And yes, I'm very concerned about what the IRS is saying.
Yes, you better be, because they have a lot of power.
Yeah, I have to address that letter. Wednesday, I've got to go, when I have a moment, I got to go to the bank and address this issue. So don't tell me that. It does matter. And you've heard that before. How many times have you said that? We are in a mess because religion has taught black people to take the path of least mental resistance.
Yes, and that you can pray your way out of everything, but you don't have to take any responsibility or accountability or make other people that you vote for and the people that you put into office, you don't even have to. You can be apathetic as you want to be, and as long as you pray, you're going to survive. But black people are not surviving now. Things are worse now for black people than they've been in a long time. So we really need to take hold of what's going on here and open up our eyes, because obviously we've been blindsided here, and it's been a lot of damage to black people. And like you've said, there's a connection, when I read that, between the high praise and the low productivity. And when you look at that, what damage has it actually done to us as black people? I mean, you've touched on it and said some things about it, but I know you can elaborate more on it, because what you said, we got all these black churches, but when you look at the poverty in the black neighborhoods, so it's been a lot of damage done to black people by black religious leaders, preachers, and so forth, and they're the ones getting rich, and the congregations are poor. So what other damages have they done to black people?
Well, Louise, that's the devil talking in you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's just what they're going to say. That's the devil.
Of course.
And not only that, Louise, faith without works. The Bible clearly tells. I mean, this is so silly. Okay, and and I know that's disrespectful to a lot of believers, but let's just call it what it is. It's silly, okay? What without works isn't dead. Everything without works is dead. You could apply that to a million things.
Yes.
But the Bible, when you look up the word faith, and I'm just saying when it's described, I think in Hebrew 1:11, I think it is, or 11:1, it says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
That's right.
Now, that is the only word not that we can find in the Bible, not love, not evil, not any other word. There's many words going through my head, but let's just say this: there's no other word in the Bible that is defined in dictionary terms, that uses dictionary terminology. No other word goes into great detail to be defined like faith. And the reason is because they knew that faith would ultimately clash with your common sense. So they had to go the extra mile to sell that to you.
Oh yeah.
And so now you have this, we're walking around proudly as believers. And belief, people say, well, Jeremiah, do you believe in God? Belief is such a useless narrative. Either I know something or I don't.
Right.
I don't believe in anything, as far as faith is concerned. I would say reasonable expectations as opposed to practicing faith. When you got your car fixed by your mechanic, you didn't have faith that he did it right. You had a reasonable expectation that it was done correctly based off of its ASC certification, the Better Business Bureau report on that company, the promises in the commercials. So you had a reasonable, but you weren't practicing faith, so to speak. So belief is dangerous. In our evolution, it was much better for us to know if there was something lurking behind the bushes than to believe that it wasn't something there.
Right.
Belief can get you killed.
Yeah.
And this is what we base our whole culture on, is belief. Belief is it is the acceptance that something is true. But we're in the age of information. I don't need to accept that there are unicorns. I need evidence.
Right.
I need some data. Okay, I need some hard facts to support it. Or otherwise, you can just tell me that there are leprechauns, and I can just say, well, I have accepted that to be true. It's nothing. It stands on absolutely nothing. And this is the basis of our culture. We are standing on nothing. We have been sold an invisible product, and we are continuing to wait for some person who allegedly has been dead for 2,000 years to come back and get you. Now you think about it, you pause for 1 second, how insane that is. Just for 1 minute, just forget all that you've been told, forget that your father's a pastor, forget that your uncle's a minister, forget all of that. If you were the only one who thought like that there was someone who walked on water, who was born of a virgin, that there was a God who's watching 7 billion people simultaneously and had a son. And, if you were the only one who believed this, you would check yourself into a mental institution.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and to the extent of faith, I I grew up a Baptist in the Bible Belt itself because I'm from Louisiana, but I've been in California most of my life. So I can say I'm more of a Californian than I am a Louisianian, just born there, pretty much graduated from high school and left. So being the age I am now, I've been in California almost 50 years, close to a half a century of my life. And I see what you're saying and I hear what you're saying to a certain extent about the faith and belief, but I have a different twist on that because faith without works is dead. And my thing is with prayer, it didn't say faith without prayer. A lot of us think that just because you pray and you don't do anything else, you don't take any action, that nothing is going to happen. And I understand what you're saying about knowing something, but I don't have a problem with believing in something that is going to happen, but you have to do something to make it happen. It's just not going to happen by you praying it and believing it and not doing anything to create that action to happen. And that's how I believe things will transpire in my life, because that's how they have. And I believe in speaking that it's going to happen. And what I've spoken and worked toward thus far, everything hasn't happened, but many of the things that I've spoken of and I have worked toward, they have happened. And I don't just believe that just because you pray and you think God is going to, and I do believe in God too, that God is just going to answer that prayer without you doing anything yourself and you just sitting back on your laurels and just thinking, oh, well, all I need to do is pray on that and I can sit back and wait. I don't believe in that philosophy.
Right. Right. Well, unfortunately, I think that would be shared by the vast majority of people, of Black people, because I can't tell you the amount of people that I've interviewed and talked to, even during the documentary. 18 months of talking to people around the country.
Oh yes.
And so I'm wondering now, why are we still in such bad shape?
Right.
What is it about Black people who have the faith, who have the strong belief, who adhere to the presence of a God? And when you look at countries around the world like Denmark, who have probably the lowest percentage of believing in a God, and just about everywhere around the world that you can think of, with the exception of America, and those are for specific reasons. But this is what really prompted me to write the book.
Yes.
I was looking at math statistics amongst Blacks, and I had read this article that said that Blacks were 186 years behind in education in the state of California, behind whites and Asians. Okay.
Oh, yes.
186 years behind.
Yes.
Now, I went to research math scores and around the country and this and that. I didn't even plan on really writing a book. I mean, I thought about it, but this was the pinnacle moment for me. It's when I discovered that without exception, the least religious countries in the world were the most prosperous.
Yep.
Oh yes, I agree with you on that.
And the most impoverished places around the world that held beliefs in a God, that looked at religion as important, that did consider themselves spiritual, that prayed and they were always, without exception, the worst off.
That's right.
And it's
right.
so true, Jeremiah, what you're saying. They are. And do you think the civil rights movement had a lot to do with it? Because like I said, your book has so much validity. And I do believe, for one, that we are on holy lockdown as a Black masses of people in this country. And you brought out so many valid points in your book. Why are the religious leaders wealthy and their congregation, they're struggling, and yet they are afraid to even question where all this money is going? The Black churches bring in billions of money annually. Where is all that money going, and why are these big mega churches sitting in the heart of the ghetto and you have homeless people, you have impoverished people, unemployed and everything, and they don't teach you. I know, because I've been into the churches, and they don't teach you about economic, financial well-being, the stock market, and all these things that have to do with economic wealth. That's not being taught by most churches. There may be a few that teach this, but the civil rights, I went to an all-black school out of Louisiana. I was only going to an integrated school when I went to college here in California, and we were taught some of the things that some of my peers weren't even taught in schools here in California, because they were in an integrated school. So what is your take on the civil rights movement in relation to all of the issues we have going on in the black community now, in conjunction with the churches?
Well, like I stated earlier, I think we're in a state of suspension. We still are operating like it's 1963.
Okay.
We do things in that manner. We look for this Messiah to lead us. We have a messianic complex. And then you say, well, who's the leader of the Jews? Who's the leader of white people?
Right.
Who's the leader of Asians? Who's the leader of Hispanics?
We always have to have that, quote, black leader to lead us to that promised land. But white folks don't have that.
No.
Latin people, they had a Cesar Chavez, but other cultures, they don't have what you're describing, that, quote, leader or Messiah that's going to lead us into prosperity. But when it comes to black people, we got to have our Al Sharpton or our Jesse Jackson or our T.D. Jakes.
Right. And T.D. Jakes went down there during the Katrina. I'll never forget. And he was like a little bobblehead next to George Bush. And he just agreed and act like he was so scared. These are your own people, man.
Right.
And they asked him about AIDS. And I remember this vividly. He said, we don't know what to... He said, the question was raised, why don't you talk about AIDS in the black community? I think it was on 2020 or 48 hours, something like that.
Right.
He said, well, we don't know anything about AIDS because Paul never mentioned it in the Bible.
See?
What?
See?
Yeah. So these are
See that?
along that whole civil rights vein and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you could probably find that on YouTube. You look it up. And I was stunned after that. I mean, Paul doesn't mention teenage pregnancy. Paul doesn't mention unfair, unjust prison industrial complex.
Right.
Paul doesn't mention deadbeat dads, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of things, teenage pregnancy, whatever. Paul doesn't mention a lot of things, but to say that in a position of leadership is pathetic and irresponsible at best. Now, in terms of this connection with the civil rights movement and the state of black people now, like I said, it's warped in a time period. I attended the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act back in 2014, and they had Andy Young there, and they had C.T. Vivian, and of course with King's daughter. And so Andrew Young, he said that one of the problems with the young people today is they don't know Jesus. And I'm thinking, how about they don't know math, they don't know science? I mean, knowing Jesus is not going to put any food on the table.
No, it's not.
You may think that it might, and you can cleverly twist it, that work your philosophical rhetorical magic to say that somehow knowing Jesus will bring all these things. But those are just claims. They're not pragmatic, they're not practical, and it's definitely not hands-on.
That's just like telling the Hindu people in India that you won't prosper unless you believe in Krishna.
Right, and you see that in India, and that's funny you should mention that, because in India it's the same thing that's going on here in the United States.
Right.
In India, you have a caste system.
Oh, yes.
What they don't tell us, Louis and Kenneth, and they're very politically correct, and I think that people like Donald Trump, they know it. The people like Hannity and with Beck and O'Reilly.
Oh, yeah.
And and Limbaugh, I think they know it, but they won't say it.
Of course they know it. It's a distraction, and they are getting paid to do this stuff, because who are their advertisers? The drug industries, in the drug industry, that's a whole, we're going to do something on that too in relation to black people, right. But we've done it before. It's a distraction. Look at all the incarcerated people, black people, it's overwhelmingly black, the incarcerated black people. All of this propaganda with mainstream media, it's a distraction. That's why I rarely watch television, because that's all it is. Yeah. And we've been bamboozled and brainwashed. We have the Willie Lynch syndrome. I talk to some black people, they don't even know anything about the Willie Lynch letter. They have no clue of what's going on. And we're so apathetic, many of us. And that's why I do this show, because we need to have our black people to become consciously aware of what's going on and start holding all leaders accountable, particularly the black leaders in our communities that we continuously elect over and over and over. And what do they do for us? Nothing.
Well, when we meet, when we gather, we have these town hall meetings or whatever, the first thing that we do, we say, let us pray.
Right.
Now, see, what that does is instantly establish a mindset that's now going to expect godly intervention to handle the issue that you're at the meeting dealing with. So, listen, it's going to take human work, sacrifice, money, effort, and discipline. All of these things it's going to take for us to achieve what we need to do. We have, since 1980, there are reports out that the blacks have given the church across the country $420 billion in aggregate.
Yes, money.
So when you do the math on that, that comes out to $250 million a week.
So why are we in poverty? What we want to do is take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk to you about the state of the black church, in which we've touched on that. We know that it's numerous black churches. You just said it, money. And we want to talk about, is slavery still going on within the black community in a sense? And we're going to talk about this fear-death thing, how black people have been taught to be fearful, because if you don't do this, you're going to get fire and brimstone, and they believe all this stuff. I don't believe it, but a lot of black people do believe that, and they just worship this white Jesus, and the Bible does not depict Jesus as being white, and my mother never put a white Jesus on her wall, and I'm glad she didn't, because we weren't brainwashed to believe that. But at any rate, we're going to take a break, and then we want to come back, and before we wrap it up, we want you to talk about a little bit about the Oscars too, and how this fear and death, fire and brimstone, and are we still in slavery in the mind, so to speak?
Oh, okay. All right, no problem.
So let's take a break.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break. Jeremiah Camara is our special guest here on Aim to Purpose, the radio show. We'll be right back. This edition of Aim to Purpose, the radio show, is brought to you by L. Hicks Consulting Services. When you want the best in business coaching, life coaching, or perhaps your organization, business, or company is in need of a dynamic speaker for an upcoming workshop or seminar, contact Louise Hicks for L. Hicks Consulting Services at 1-562-310-1495. From anywhere around the world, that's 1-562-310-1495. For more information about Louise Hicks and her consulting services, visit her website at www.louisehicks.biz. Again, that's www.louisehicks.biz. Or call 1-562-310-1495.
310-1495. L. Hicks Consulting Services, where professionalism is top priority.
Hello, world, again. We are having a great conversation here today with our special guest as we kicked off Black History Month, Jeremiah Camara, and we're talking about Holy Lockdown, religion and black culture here in America. And we're talking about it from the perspective of his book here, Holy Lockdown, Does the Church Limit Black Progress? And I would suggest that you go out and buy this book, as well as his dynamic documentary, which is entitled Contradiction, A Question of Faith. And at the end of the show, we'll share with you where you can pick up the book and the documentary and how you can contact Jeremiah. And before we went to the break, we were talking about the state of the church and all of these churches and how we bring in billions as black people through the church. Yet we are neighborhood poor. And I didn't say community poor because we don't have communities for the most part in the black neighborhoods. It's a neighborhood. Yeah. You don't have a decent grocery store. You're full of liquor stores. You got several churches. Some have 10 people in them at a time. And right. It's sad. So there seems to be lack of unity amongst the so-called leaders, and they are the ones getting wealthy while their congregations are poor. And I like the way you kind of phrased it here with high praise and low prosperity. And that's exactly what it amounts to. And sadly, we are in a sad state here in America in terms of the black masses. There are some rich, wealthy people, and I know people will say, oh, well, we got Oprah. But so what? Oprah is only one person. And you have a few other wealthy black people. But for the most part, we as a black ethnic group, we're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to economics and social justice. And that needs to change. And we have to take personal responsibility and make the people that are accountable to us to get what needs to be done, because we know the Constitution was founded on false pretense when it said all men are created equal, and we were never counted as being equal because we were counted as partial of a man. And I don't mean that gender specific, but let's talk about the slavery still going on in a sense in the black community. And we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, but we have time to talk about that and the Oscars. Get your take on that and the fear of death in the black community, because I think that's how they bamboozle and brainwash us and tell us about Jesus, the blue-eyed white Jesus, which is not the way Jesus is depicted.
Right. One of the things you said was slavery still in existence. Yes, there is no other way to put that. Mm-hmm. And there's so many things that we can point to verify that, to corroborate that notion. When the people like these big churches, right, they're not just beholding to the community. There is no black community. There are black neighborhoods. Right. Okay. And so once the money comes into these black churches, do you think that when Creflo Dollar gets paid, that Kenneth Copeland doesn't get anything, when Kenneth Copeland is the one who put him on the map?
Okay.
Do you think that Oral Roberts Foundation doesn't get paid when T.D. Jakes rakes in some money, when Oral Roberts is, put him on the map? Many of these big preachers were found during the Azusa Street evangelical fest that they have in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, they did a good job according to the master, and so we recruited them, and we pushed them, and we backed them, and we give them what they need to create this big facility. Do you think that an institution like World Changes and the Potter's House could have come just from black money?
Right.
There's no way.
Right.
There's absolutely no way that it could have happened. So we are still indebted to our slave masters who are going to make sure he gets his off the top before the community, the black community, gets anything, because he's the one that put us in that position. So yes, we are enslaved. You are enslaved. A slave is defined by many things. One, of course, is their economic status.
Mm-hmm.
And so the churches are draining the life out of the black community every week. And what do you get out of it? Like I said, you get repetition, if you're honest. But people are afraid not to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid not to believe. Okay.
Is that matter. Fear after death, that they think they're not going to heaven?
Of course, that's the crux of it.
Okay.
Louise, right there. And I just did a talk here at the Black Non-Believers of Atlanta, which I'll send to you once I get the video. And I talked extensively, I won't go into it now, about that fear of death and how I think we should view death. And so I'm going to send that to you and make it available, to the people once I have a copy.
Well, we'll have to have you back then to talk about that and your documentary.
Sure. The documentary is called "Contradiction: The Question of Faith." We travel around the country, and we ask the question: why are there so many churches, yet so many problems in black communities? Mm-hmm. And again, like Holy Lockdown, is there a connection between high praise and low productivity? And so the documentary was well received. We showed it. As a matter of fact, we showed it probably in like 13 places out there in Southern California.
Well, when are you coming back? When are you coming back to Southern California, Los Angeles?
I'm not sure, but I definitely want to come back out to LA. We were in South Central. We had a packed house.
Good.
I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, and it's done well. I think people have gotten some things out of it. And my thing is not to convert. My thing is to get us to think.
That's it. Yep. Critical thinking.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Listen, being a non-believer, being an atheist, being a skeptic, being a humanist, or whatever you want to call it, is not a crime.
Right.
When you question whether you question the validity of some animals being loaded upon an ark, when you question the validity of a man parting a sea where people can go through, and this whole notion of Jews being enslaved, which in Egypt, which never happened. But when you start to question these crazy things that you read in the Bible, that's not the devil. That's your brain doing its job.
Mm.
And that's
your brain
right.
has a part of your brain that is in a state of inquiry at all times. And that's what a brain does. It analyzes.
Right.
It seeks answers. It seeks to find meaning. That's what it does. It's not the devil. And so this conversation that we're having tonight, if Creflo's people were to listen, I almost dropped out this whole thing, you guys. When he was awarded that, money, $70 million, he asked for 65. I think he got 70 to get a plane.
For the airplane. Oh, that was disgusting to me.
When you come on his street, Old National, there's crime, there's drugs.
Oh, yes.
There's robbery, all on this street, and he goes out to preach mythology around the world, and there's no way to measure the effectiveness of his ministering to people around the world.
Well, it's a way of measuring it here in the United States, the ministry of the ministers. Look in the neighborhood, and that measures. And look at all the black people that go to church. I know most of them are females, but when you look in the neighborhood, that measures what Christianity and what religion is doing within our neighborhood. And I want to ask you quickly, because I know we're getting close to time, about the Oscars. What do you think about that? We know it's been a lot of controversial going on about the Oscars, which it's nothing new, because the Oscars, at once upon a time, I didn't even watch the Oscars because it had no relevancy to me.
Right, I haven't watched it in about 30 years.
Yeah, well, I used to not watch it. I haven't watched it
in about 30, probably more than that. I'm telling you, when I say 30, I mean I think the last time I've seen it was in the 70s or sometime or early 80s. And so My take on this whole thing is they invented Oscar. Why don't you just go and invent Otis? See, my thing, why do we hold what they do in their awards in such high regards as the measurement, as the standard of excellence? Why can't you promote your own thing and hold it to high in high regards and high accountability and lift it up as something to value? Why?
And you're right.
I mean, okay, you didn't get an Oscar. Okay, that is minute compared to these brothers that are in prison.
Absolutely.
That is minute to blacks being 10 times more likely to receive prison times for the same offenses as whites. That's what our mind needs to be on, okay? When you take your males out of the community, it is the same as looking at this big ant pile and disturbing it, and you see all the what appears to be chaos of these ants. You have lost the order, you have lost the direction, you have lost the guidance, and you have lost the foresight of your communities when you take the men out.
Well, it was about tearing down the family structure of the black families, and I know that for a fact because of when I was born and raised and how we were raised and with the welfare system. But that's a different, we can get into that. But I certainly would like to have you to come back. So what we need to do is...
I know we're running out of time. Hate to cut you off, but you can get the book and order the DVD at JeremiahCamara.com. I kept it simple. You can just visit Jeremiah Camara, JeremiahCamara.com. The book Holy Lockdown, the book The New Doubting Thomas, the documentary Contradiction, A Question of Faith are all available online at JeremiahCamara.com.
Perfect. JeremiahCamara.com. And you see the name here on the screen right there. Go to it, JeremiahCamara.com, Holy Lockdown, Doubting Thomas, and the new DVD called Contradiction, A Question of Faith. And we want to thank you, Jeremiah Camara, for being our special guest on the show. So much to talk about with so little time. We could do this show for 2-3 hours.
Yes,
no doubt.
or longer.
Longer.
But we thank you for sharing all of this vital and valuable information as we kick off. And I meant to ask you, what did you think quickly about Black History Month? Do you think it's necessary or not? Just quickly.
I think it's necessary. It draws attention to a lot of achievements. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we have a rich history that many people in America have no clue about because we're never taught it in grade school.
Right,
and you're not going to be taught it because it's by design to keep us from knowing our history. So the best way for your children to know your history is pick up documentaries like Hidden Colors and the documentary you're talking about, and the Pipeline that Raheem Shabazz, who has been on our show before, and documentaries like what you just talked about, Contradiction, your documentary, Question of Faith. So until we get those types of that type of knowledge infiltrated into our brains, we're going to have a problem. So just a final thought quickly, and then we will be out.
Okay, well, I just want to encourage people to question what they're into. If you call yourself a Baptist, then give me the history of it. Where did it start? You call yourself a Methodist, how did that start? Know something about how the Bible was created as opposed to just so-called studying the Bible. Study how it was put together. Understand that you needed paper, you needed ink, you needed attorneys, you needed the political backing, you needed a whole bunch of things in place. It's not an organic thing that came from the trees or from the ground. Right. It was put together by men.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. And with that being said, until next week, remember, your power lies within you. Let it loose.
Until next week.
Yes, thank you.